You're watching WorldViewTube, built on the 35 years of WorldView books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
You said last week that you have the Epstein files on your desk. When can we see them, and what's taking so long to release them?
I do. Jesse, there are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims. 200. So we have, well over 250 actually. So we have to make sure that their identity is protected and their personal information. But other than that, I think tomorrow, the personal information of victims. Other than that, I think tomorrow, Jesse, breaking news right now, you're going to see some Epstein information being released by my office.
What kind? Are we going to see who was on the flights? Are we going to see any evidence from what he recorded? Because he had all of his homes wired with recording devices.
Yeah. What you're going to see, hopefully tomorrow, is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information, but it's pretty sick what that man did.
Okay, well, we'll
along
look for
with his
that.
co-defendant.
Absolutely, and he had help. That's for
He
sure.
sure did.
In the news, WorldViewTube's Washington Report has debuted this past week. Welcome to Truth Thursday. The Rob Maness Show is live on WorldViewTube, our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Roku, Amazon Fire, all over the place. Well, Epstein is the story breaking the last 24 hours, and that's why we're covering it today. We're doing a hard news show today because WorldViewTube now has a Washington, D.C. correspondent, and our CEO, Mr. Brannon House, has debuted the news show, The Washington Report. So go check it out this evening. Exactly what will we see from the Epstein files is still a big question out there, but the time has finally arrived for the information about his clients to come out. And it's been released to some major independent media personalities like Mike Cernovich and Jack Posobiec. So we'll be finding out really soon what phase one looks like. We'll be covering the D.C. news of the week, such as the White House press secretary taking control of the press pool. That was hilarious. President Trump's first cabinet meeting and the first budget resolution bill passing the U.S. House of Representatives, setting the stage for the one or two, maybe, big, beautiful reconciliation bills to process through both houses of Congress. I don't have much high hope for the outcome of either one of those bills, whether it's one or two, to be honest with you. Well, my guest today is our new D.C. correspondent, Neil McCabe. Neil is a Washington-based journalist and media consultant. He writes for Red State, appears on the Armed American radio station, and co-hosts Trump Tuesday. He's also a senior non-commissioned officer in the Army Reserves and an Iraq war veteran. Neil will be with us after the first segment, where I'll introduce him again. Well, folks, it's the Epstein files time. And we've seen the pictures of the so-called, they're called influencers by some folks in the media side on X, but I call them independent media personalities and journalists. Look, Mike Cernovich, he's the person really that started the entire legal process and enabled that against Jeffrey Epstein in the first place, down in a court case. I believe it was down in the Florida area. And he is very well versed in that. And he was in the group in the photograph that had a copy of the Phase 1 Epstein files. And I really look forward to his analysis of that to see what truth is being made public finally. And more importantly, what his opinion is of what is still being hidden, because I have no doubt that we're not going to ever get everything, but we should get most of it, because there's really no reason to keep a lot of this stuff a secret anymore. Now, the victim information and those kinds of things, I understand that being redacted completely. But even though it's an active investigation, it's my opinion that the clients are so well known, and they're going to get their discovery information from the prosecution if it ever goes to trial anyway. There's no reason to hide much of this information right now. So I encourage AG Bondi to get it out there as quickly as possible. Well, let's go over to the audience. I know we've got one hand up over there, and everybody who has been very interested in this this morning because we should be. This is extremely important. I believe it's a very deep and wide intelligence operation that has been used to keep politicians around the world in check, as opposed to them doing what's right and doing what they were elected to do by the people they represent, like here in this country. We'll go over to Shell, our host in our X Space, with the audience. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Nicholas, sir.
Well, my question is related to something Laura Loomer stated or said, and that is about Pam Bondi and her time in Florida, because she mentioned that Pam Bondi was in charge down there, and while Epstein lived down there and didn't go after him. So my question is that the reason for the delay? Is she still being Pam Bondi of Florida?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, there could be a number of reasons for that. I think the case against Epstein was a federal case, if I remember correctly. And somebody please correct me from the audience if I'm wrong about that. So there could be a reason why the state attorney general was staying hands off for that reason. I just don't know. I do know that I have my reservations about Bondi. She has some very close establishment ties, but she's only been sworn in for a couple of weeks now. So it's hard to push the throttle all the way up when you're walking into an organization that's vast. And we know there's some opposition in the rank and file and the mid-level management to the president, which means there's opposition to her and what she wants to do. So not making excuses for her, but I can understand why this approach is being taken. What I won't understand, though, is if there's more redactions than just the victims' information in the information we are getting out. Who's next, Shel?
We have Cookie, sir.
Hey, good afternoon. I find it interesting how this was released, even though we haven't seen everything, using the social influencers. What are your takes on giving it to those instead of giving it to the mainstream media? Is been around forever.
Well, as I've said in my opening, Mike Cernovich is he's one of the independent media personalities or influencers, like some people are calling them. I call them independent media personnel or personalities these days, because that's what they are, is independent media. They're independent of the legacy media, which refuses to report accurately on this stuff, hasn't ever done it, has no curiosity into how Jeffrey Epstein really died, and has run with the government narrative at every opportunity on this story and almost every story, if not every story that we've seen in the last 10 years. So I'm glad that they put it in the hands of people like Mike Cernovich, Jack Posobiec, and those kind of folks, because they have large followings, so a lot of eyes are going to get on it, and they're more honest brokers of the information they're getting than the legacy media is, and that's why I see it as a good thing. Any more questions or comments from the audience?
I don't see any more hands, sir.
Well, what do you all think out there in TV land about what is going to happen with phase 2 of this? That's a question that I have in my mind. I'm hearing some initial reports that from people in Congress that this information in this book that was released today in phase 1 is just nothing but his telephone contact list, that there's not even any flight logs in it. And I'll remind the audience that flight logs have been released before for Epstein's aircraft. We've seen Bill Clinton on those flight logs that were released several years ago, but not all of them were released. So we still have some information that we want to get to in that regard. And we want to get to the majority or all of the clients. It's the clients that hold the key to answering the question. And the question about Jeffrey Epstein is, what was the operation? I believe that it's a worldwide international intelligence operation that's been used to blackmail politicians around the world, not just in America, to keep them from doing what their voters elected them to do. And that's one of the reasons why we're probably in the situation in the United States where we are today. I believe this operation was used to protect things like the USAID expenditures that many hundreds, if not thousands of Americans that have worked in national security, especially in the intelligence community, have fought in the wars, have complained about USAID's function, its activities overseas, especially in war zones, that have harmed Americans and harmed our ability to reach our strategic and operational and tactical objectives in our military operations. So that's one of the things that I believe this operation is about protecting those types of expenditures. And USAID obviously isn't the only one. The Pentagon budget has what's called a black budget aspect to it. The military intelligence or the intelligence budget is closed to the public also in what I call the black world. The space budget has been in the black world for a long time. It's one of the reasons that I advocated for the Space Force to be peeled off from the United States Air Force, because the space budget was subsuming. You couldn't see it, but those of us that knew could see that it was subsuming the operations budget of and training budget of the United States Air Force. And the same reason the Air Force was spun off of the U.S. Army in the 1940s, it was subsuming the budget of the Army forces, which was their primary, used to do their primary mission. So all of these budgets that are in the black world, I would like to see the majority of the information in those budgets brought out into the light of day. And if releasing this information gets us to being able to do that, I'm all for it. Again, though, the clients are the key to provide the linkage to the perpetrators of the operation. And I don't know what intelligence agencies are involved, but my guess is all of them are involved in some way. Even our adversaries' intelligence agencies could be involved in this because it's that big of an operation. Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, our guest, Neil McCabe, will be here. He's our Washington, D.C. correspondent now for WorldViewTube, and we'll be hitting some more hard news. Well, wait a minute. I've got a hand in the audience. Let's take that question before we go to the break, Mr. Producer. Go ahead, Shel.
We're going to go with Isaiah Washington, sir.
Well, I think, this is going to be a long space, but before we get out of here, I just want your thoughts, Colonel, on this bid, $25 billion bid from Eric Blackwater Prince regarding stepping in to help get the immigrants out of here. But maybe that won't fit in this space, but I would love to hear a space on that.
That's a good question. I want to do a show on him himself. I might even be able to get him as the guest to ask him about that. I would just say before we go to the break, Isaiah, that he is a businessman in addition to being, a former special operator. Obviously, all of us that have worked in that type of world have an intelligence aspect to our backgrounds, as you know, and everything. So there's probably a dual track decision for him on this. He may be trying to get some business back for his company because that's what he does, is tries to make money. But in addition, he may be trying to resolve a situation that the intel side and the military operations and logistics side has gotten into, that they might not be able to adequately meet the mission that the president's team has given them. So there's probably a little bit of a mixture of all of those three. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show with our guest, Neil McCabe, our Washington, D.C. correspondent for WorldViewTube.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at WVWFoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at WVWFoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at WVWFoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
As you all know, for decades, a group of DC-based journalists, the White House Correspondents Association, has long dictated which journalists get to ask questions of the President of the United States in these most intimate spaces. Not anymore. I am proud to announce that we are going to give the power back to the people who read your papers, who watch your television shows, and who listen to your radio stations. Moving forward, the White House press pool will be determined by the White House press team. Legacy outlets who have participated in the press pool for decades will still be allowed to join, fear not, but we will also be offering the privilege to well-deserving outlets who have never been allowed to share in this awesome responsibility. Just like we added a new media seat in this briefing room, legacy media outlets who have been here for years will still participate in the pool. But new voices are going to be welcomed in as well. As part of these changes, we will continue the rotation amongst the 5 major television networks to ensure the President's remarks are heard far and wide around this world. We will add additional streaming services which reach different audiences than traditional cable and broadcast. This is the ever-changing landscape of the media in the United States today. We will continue to rotate a print pooler who has the great responsibility of quickly transcribing the President's remarks and disseminating them to the rest of the world. And we will add outlets to the print pool rotation who have long been denied the privilege to partake in this experience, but are committed to covering this White House beat. We will continue to rotate a radio pooler and add other radio hosts who have been denied access, especially local radio hosts who serve as the heartbeat of our country. And we will add additional outlets and reporters who are well suited to cover the news of the day and ask substantive questions of the President of the United States, depending on the news he is making on that given day.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday, and we're doing a little bit of a hard news show today. The first segment, we talked about the Jeffrey Epstein files and the release that's occurring as we speak and everything. And my guest today is our WorldViewTube new Washington, D.C. correspondent, Neil McCabe. Neil's a writer for Red State. He's a show host in his own right, and he's also a senior NCO in the U.S. Army Reserves and is an Iraq war veteran. Neil, welcome to the Rob Maness Show for the first time.
Hey, Colonel, really, I know we've spoken before on the phone, and it's just a thrill to be on the show with you today, sir.
I'm excited to have you on because I'm excited about what you're bringing to the WorldViewTube network, man. I make no secret about it. I think Brandon House is an exceptional CEO and really understands the news and the media business, and bringing you on is a key feature of where I think, and I'm hoping that the network's going to go. Well, let's talk about that little clip there. You know, you've been on the inside in the journalism world for quite a while, I'm pretty sure. How big of a deal is that, and what is this White House Correspondents Association? It's a private entity, right? How can it control what it used to control, and what is the big deal about this change that Caroline just announced?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I was a proud member of the White House Correspondents Association. When I left Washington to be the comms director for Project Veritas, I know it was no longer covering the White House and Capitol Hill, so I let my membership lapse. But what it what it is, it's a group of legacy journalists who get together and they have a big dinner every year that raises money for scholarships to support journalism. And they've just sort of managed things with continuity. Administrations come and go. And so these guys just sort of kept the White House press corps, just sort of, kept things flowing in a sense of decorum, and they managed the pool and things like that. And in a lot of ways, they were appreciated by administrations because they handled a lot of sort of the administrative things. But it got really out of hand. And I can tell you that many people when the Biden team came in, so many people lost their press passes. Conservatives were boxed out. The excuse was COVID, but really it was censorship, and it was keeping people out of the room. And the White House Correspondents Association took a lot of blame for that. Maybe they didn't feel like they were in a position to fight it or not, but there it is. I have to say though, when you talk about the pool, right? Obviously, when the president, we saw him today with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, you can't have 500 people in the Oval Office. So obviously, you have to have 5 or 6 reporters, 5 or 6 photographers, 5 or 6 videographers, and then their stuff is shared by everybody. The pool reports are not exclusive. But what was happening under the Biden administration is that there was like a double secret pool. And these guys were given all the good stuff. These guys were given the secret briefings. These guys were given all the dirt. And it's almost like they were all on the same team, if you can imagine, right? And so things just got so out of control that the Trump team, when they came back, they had to take it. Now, remember, Caroline Leavitt, she was a press secretary in the first term. So she worked in this press shop. So these guys, they know the ropes, and they've had 4 years of exile to sort of think about it. So they, when they came back, they knew exactly what strings to pull and what buttons to push, Colonel.
Yeah, absolutely. Why should a private organization like the WHCA be able to control the assignments? That's the part that puzzles me. I get the whole continuity thing and all that, but when the press secretary gets appointed and and gets in place, and his team gets in place, shouldn't they be the ones that do those selections?
Well, early on in the first term, Sean Spicer tried to take control over things. And, he had been a communications director for the House Budget Committee. He had worked for the U.S. Trade Representative. He had been the communications director for the Republican National Committee. He had been in Washington for a long time. He knew the ropes, and he went in there and he said, this is the way it's going to be. And he started to make all these changes. And there was such a crazy uproar that he backed down, and they went after him. I don't think there's a press secretary who's ever been torched and scorched the way they went after Sean Spicer, completely unfairly, because he's a great guy. He's a tremendous professional, but he tried, and they pushed him back. Your question, I guess, is like lawyers have the Bar Association, you have the American Medical Association, you have groups of professionals who sort of manage themselves. That's what you have with the press corps.
The interesting thing is that I see all of those associations that you just mentioned as having absolutely failed their professions.
Oh, sure.
Over
1,000%
years in spectacular ways. It's crazy. So tell us about the new show. What time does it air every night? And what are you focusing on in the show, The Washington Report?
Well, we do 2 things. Every night, Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 8, I come on with Brandon, and we talk about the top news stories of the day. And that might be the courts, that might be Trump, that might be Congress, or it might be, whatever. Sometimes we go down a rabbit hole because because it's kind of a conversation between two guys. You're basically listening in to a couple of guys talking about the news. And then what we do on the weekends is we have the Washington desk. It runs Saturday and Sunday, 7 to 8. So it's a 1-hour show where you have longer conversation interviews with people in the news. And it's been a lot of fun, and it's great. You know, when I was working as a TV reporter before, everything had to be like a 2-minute package. So you talk to somebody for 20 minutes, and then you can use like 3 15-second sound bites. I'm sure, Colonel, you've been in situations where you sit down for an interview and you talk to them and you tell them all these wonderful things, and then you watch it and it's like they use this much. And so on the Washington Desk show, we can kind of long form it and really get into the details. This weekend, we're going to talk to Adam Villarilli. He was a J6er who was pardoned by the president. But what's interesting is he was actually turned in by his older brother. And his younger brother told him, hey, Adam, you know, our older brother just turned you in to the FBI within basically 24 hours after the protest at the Capitol. And so he was on the lam for 4 years, and he met his wife on the lam, and he talks about that situation and their own personal struggles as they go through things. And that's the kind of conversation that you just can't boil down into 3 15-second sound bites.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I like to do with my show is have one guest and do a long form interview so that we can get good detailed information out. You know, I mean, the whole 15-second soundbite is useful if you're trying to propagandize a message, but it's not very useful to the listeners and the viewers if you're really trying to get them some hard facts. Now, was this gentleman you were just talking about, was he the guy that went to Russia and asked for asylum? Or is that somebody else?
That would be amazing. That would be an amazing interview if I failed to get that out of him. I hope not, because that would really expose me as a boob. But he could be. He could be. And that would be part 2 of an ongoing series.
I only remember that happened. I don't remember who the name is, so I was just wondering if that was the guy.
Absolutely. It was the whole J6 thing is such a horrible situation. I will tell you that my own personal feeling, and I actually talked to Enrique Tarrio about it, who was the president of the Proud Boys, that I feel for these guys the way the last generation or 2 generations ago felt about the Cuban freedom fighters who were abandoned on the beaches of the Bay of Pigs. And, you know, it was a horrible, horrible thing that happened to them. And, you know, for the rest of their lives, and many of them are still with us, but, you know, in the Cuban American community, these people are treated as cherished patriots. And I think that's how we have to treat these J6ers, because there were some insane things that happened that day. But no one who was involved in smashing windows or bullhorns or anything had any connection with the Trump campaign. They've had 4 years to prove that Trump had somehow done this. They say it all the time, sir, but no one ever proves it. And there's a phrase the mainstream media uses all the time with Trump: without evidence, right? He said without evidence. Where is the evidence that Trump had anything to do with this mob that really went wild? And I'll just make this point on J6 because it's important to me. The president and his team were challenging the rigged, crooked electors in Biden states. Arizona was being debated. Why would Trump send a mob to disrupt his own team's plan to challenge the electors? It defies logic, but nobody ever takes it to that next step, sir.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's similar to what happened to the Vietnam veterans when they came home. Hanoi Jane's been in the media the last couple of days. And we've been reminding people of what she did, which is why people were mistreated when they came home as veterans, and now they're cherished. The veterans of the Vietnam War are cherished patriots, and I think you're absolutely right. The manufactured evidence and lies by law enforcement in actual court documents, the judges that harangued these men and women when they were handing down sentences with falsehoods should all be sued for defamation, should be investigated for criminal charges, and then tried in a court before a jury of their actual peers out in America, not in Washington, D.C., and see what they get for justice. They'll get real American justice. So we got to take a break, Neil. When we come back, I want to talk about some of the other breaking news this week. Trump's first cabinet meeting happened, so we'll take an opportunity to chat about that. We'll be right back with Neil McCabe, our Washington, D.C. correspondent from WorldViewTube.
That's the way it works. So I'd like to have Elon Musk please say a few words.
Okay. Thank you, Elon. Thank you, Mr. President. I actually just call myself a humble tech support here because this is actually, as crazy as it sounds, that is almost a literal description of the work that the Doge team is doing, is helping fix the government computer systems. Many of these systems are extremely old. They don't communicate. There are a lot of mistakes in the systems. The software doesn't work. So we are actually tech support. It's ironic, but it's true. The overall goal here with the Doge team is to help address the enormous deficit. We simply cannot sustain as a country $2 trillion deficits. The interest rates, just the interest on the national debt, now exceeds the Defense Department spending. We spend a lot on the Defense Department, but we're spending over $1 trillion on interest. If this continues, the country will become de facto bankrupt. It's not an optional thing; it is an essential thing. That's the reason I'm here. And taking a lot of flack, and getting a lot of death threats, by the way. I mean, I like to stack them up, But if we don't do this, America will go bankrupt. That's why it has to be done. And I'm confident at this point, knock on wood, knock on my wooden head, there's got a lot of wood up there, that we can actually find $1 trillion in savings. That would be roughly 15% of the $7 trillion budget. And obviously that can only be done with the support of everyone in this room. And I'd like to thank everyone for your support. Thank you very much. This can only be done with your support. So it's really, Doge is a support function for the president and for the agencies and departments to help achieve those savings and to effectively find 15% in reduction in fraud and waste. And we bring the receipts. So people say, well, is this real? Just go to doge.gov. We line item by line item, we specify each item.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday. My guest today is our Washington, D.C. correspondent from WorldViewTube and host of the Washington desk on the weekends and comes into the show at each evening now with Brandon House to do the Washington, D.C. report. Neil McCabe is with us. So, Neil, that was interesting. His first full cabinet meeting, and the very first person he asked to speak is not a cabinet member.
Yeah, it was a great, it was either the Washington Post or the New York Times basically had a headline, "The elephant in the room wore black." And this guy's just amazing. As you were playing the clip, Colonel, I was thinking to myself, in other times, right, who was the richest man in the world? And so, would John D. Rockefeller or J.P. Morgan be in this position to just come in and say, you know what, I'm going to help the government. I'm going to sleep on the floor. And basically with monster drinks and a bag of Doritos, I'm going to be with all these kids. It's like very much the sort of, I don't want to say frat boy, right? Because that's a different dynamic. But it was definitely, college, all-nighters, but these guys are working hard and they're motivated. They're motivated by a sense of patriotism, not greed. It's insane to say that Elon Musk is motivated by greed or he's trying to get some kind of special deal, just like with President Trump. And believe me, they could make a ton more money if they weren't doing this, if money was their issue. And how about these cabinet officials, where he's coming up there and he's saying with humility, he's saying, I am your tech support. I am here to support you. I am not directing traffic, right? I am taking signals from the president's tower. I am not giving out signals myself. And we're so lucky to have him. And, one of my biggest fears is that, something would happen, and we see it all the time, especially very early in administrations. People who are on the extremes, people who are the most adamant supporters of a president's agenda get bounced. We saw it with Van Jones in the early Obama administration. We saw George Gilder being bounced from the Reagan administration. Imagine if we had George Gilder for 8 years in the Reagan White House. But what happens is these true believers, they get bounced. We did not really see it in the Biden administration because none of his handlers actually believe in anything except for themselves. So it isn't interesting. Sometimes I forget that Biden was president in between these two terms, because it's almost like when they blocked Trump in the White House after 2020, they thought he would go away, but really we got 12 years of Trump instead of 8.
I think the Biden presidency is going to be the first asterisk presidency, like some of the World Series winners that when they were using steroids and the home run kings like Mark McGwire, you get caught on steroids. Bonds, I think, is another one. They've got an asterisk by their name, even though they're still on the list and in the record list and everything. The Biden administration has to be the one asterisk presidency, because there really wasn't a president, Neil. There really wasn't a president. What did you think? What are you hearing about the infamous 5 bullet point emails? I mean, Elon addressed it there a little bit, but it's really just a pulse check. Is there somebody alive at this email address?
Yeah, it's like when you I'm speaking as an NCO, right? It's when you go into the barracks, health and welfare check, right? No reason, nothing going on. Just wanted to see how you're doing, Joe. And apparently 1 million people didn't reply. So now we have a list of 1 million people to check up on. But before we couldn't do it. But with Grok and AI and all these other programs, these guys can actually chew into it. I'll tell you what's interesting, sort of a premonition, or it's almost like the proto-Doge was the continuing resolution that was 15,000 pages. And for decades, they would dump this thing on people, and no one could read it. And I know in Washington, D.C., you have 1,500 pages of a continuing resolution. Literally what you would do is you would give 100 pages to 15 people, and hopefully they would catch something and they would take notes. But Elon Musk was able to chew through it all, and they were able to, I think it got down to 150 pages, right? I think that's 90%. That's incredible. But that was the precursor, the harbinger, if you will, of Doge.
Yeah, I've been experimenting with the level 3 Grok, the third release of Grok, the last. So, and that technology can take a document, and it doesn't just summarize it. I mean, you can. It'll set up query questions for you. You can ask it one simple question, upload the document, and it will spit out in about 45 seconds on average, from what I'm seeing, for a 10-page single-spaced document. Not just a summary; it'll summarize it, but it also goes like 4 or 5 levels down into different aspects of the document that it sees. Then it comes back with a list of query questions that you might want to ask it again. To dive even deeper into this thing. It's amazing. And I'm going to use that on all those bills, every darn one of them.
Oh, absolutely.
American people should be doing it too.
Yeah, I'm sure your parents told you about President Reagan. And, at the State of the Union, he would drop this stack of papers, right? That was the federal budget. And he'd say, I'm supposed to read through this. It'd be like 6 feet high, right?
Yeah.
It's and they just can't do it anymore. And of course, the president will be speaking before Congress on Tuesday, and that's also when the tariffs go into effect. And so, the hits just keep coming, right? There's no such thing as a slow news day in Trump 2.0, Colonel.
That's why I'm glad we have you on board, my friend. We've got a question from our live audience. We do the live audience thing here on this show. And our host over there is Shell. Shell, go ahead.
Hello, Neil. I have a question for you. What would be your 5 answers to the questions that were emailed out by Elon Musk?
Are you talking about my day job or my WorldViewTube job? I would say that what have I done? I put together a great show for Saturday and Sunday called The Washington Desk, which runs at 7 p.m. in the East, and I do these phenomenal shows called Washington Report with Brandon House, and they run 7:30 to 8 in the East, and that's 2. I finished all my dinners. I gave my dear wife some cough medicine, and I completed a chapter in the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, which is something I've been meaning to do for a long time. And what else? Is there one more? I'll tell you. I get a crazy thing, Shell. I have 2 daughters. I have 2 sons, 2 daughters. Every year I'm in the running for Father of the Year, and it's always a game. When do I blow it? Like, when do I completely blow it? Right now I'm out of the running already because I wanted to surprise Catherine with $200 that she didn't ask for, and I don't know if she needed it or not. And I accidentally sent it to Kellyanne. So Kelly's like, hey, thanks, Dad. And I had to call her up and say, no, you have to give it to Catherine. She's like, what? How could you? And so we ended up giving them both $200. But it's like, imagine your father, Shelly. Imagine your father calling you and telling you, I accidentally gave you some money. You have to give it to your sister. What a rat bastard I am.
Just to correct you, you mentioned that my mom and dad might have told me about Ronald Reagan. I actually, my my first vote was for Ronald Reagan for president in the Republican primary. So I'm a little bit older than you think I am. What did you think about the president doing a press conference in the cabinet meeting? I love it that he does that in his office and all that. I was a little surprised he did it in the first cabinet meeting, but I think it's great.
Well, you have the White House briefings at 1, and then you basically have the Trump briefings at 3. And I was actually thinking about it right before the show because, the media is a real estate business. A newspaper or a magazine, maybe your parents told you about newspapers and magazines. You only have so much space, right? The column inches.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing on a podcast or an X space or a TV show. You only have so much time. You only have so much space. And so what Trump has done is he has just completely flooded the zone, right? The old Bear Bryant term. And so how does Hakeem Jeffries get a word in? How does Charles Schumer get a word in? Because it's just too much. And it's like every day, the president of France, the prime minister of England. Oh, Zelensky signing the mineral treaty. It's like every day it's something huge. Oh, and also we're releasing the Epstein files. Like, boom, boom, boom.
Exactly right. I mean, you could do a news show 24 hours a day now, literally, and have some meat in every hour to spend a long time talking about. Well, we got to take our last break, Neil, because we're running out of time. There's so much to talk about. Next segment and the last one, we'll move over to Congress and talk about the budget resolution. And I want to get your thoughts on that. We'll be right back with Neil McCabe on the Rob Maness Show at WorldViewTube.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
Thank you all for staying on a long night. We got it done. We had the requisite number of votes to move this process along, and now passing the budget resolution in the House, it will go to the Senate. This is the first important step in opening up the reconciliation process. We have a lot of hard work ahead of us, but we are going to deliver the America First agenda. We're going to deliver all of it, not just parts of it, and this was the first step in that process. So grateful to my colleagues who worked so hard to get us here, and to all the leaders of the chairs of the committees of jurisdiction. Chairman Arrington did a great job on the Budget Committee, and Chairman Smith on Ways and Means, and all of our colleagues who worked on this. So a lot of work yet to be done, but we're going to celebrate tonight, and we'll roll up our sleeves and get right back at it in the morning. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday. We're doing a hard news show with our reporter, our correspondent from Washington, D.C., Neil McCabe, today. So he's been my guest for most of the show. And Neil, I have to talk about this budget resolution because the president talks about it so much, the big, beautiful reconciliation bill. Mike got it passed. He got the first one passed out of the House, which is where they really have to originate. But the Senate also passed their version. How does this reconciliation process supposed to work? You're pretty familiar with it.
Right. So there's an idea or a principle in sort of parliamentary theory that the budget must be passed. And so when they did the Budget Act of 1974, which was really a reaction to the way Nixon had been refusing to spend money, and it was one of these Watergate era reforms like the War Powers Act. And so reconciliation, though, is the idea that, because the Senate has two votes, the vote to end debate called cloture, and then once you end debate, you go to the floor vote. So there's two votes, but if you want to stop the ending of stop cloture, you can literally keep the debate going on forever because it takes 60 votes to end debate, and that's called the filibuster. So if you have 41 votes, you can block something from coming to the floor, even though you only need 51 votes for it to pass on the floor. If you don't have 60, you can't get it to the floor. And so the reconciliation portion of that Budget Act says that the budget cannot be filibustered. It's a simple majority of 51 votes, but you only get one bite at the apple every year. And so that's why a president, and if he has the majorities like Trump has in both houses, the idea is to pile in as much as you can into this reconciliation bill because you can't filibuster it. And so it's an opportunity to override those objections. And so the big, beautiful bill is the idea we're going to get everything using the reconciliation and get it all done, or as much as we can. What the Senate was saying, and this is Thune, Lindsey Graham, who's chairman of the Budget Committee, but also with some people from the Freedom Caucus, we're saying let's do two bills. We'll do one little bill, which is like taxes and immigration and border and energy. And basically, it really wouldn't deal with spending or taxes. It would be about a lot of policy and a lot of regulation. And it would be, and basically a lot of lobbyists and donors would get what they want right away with the promise that, don't worry, Mr. Trump, we'll do a second bill and you'll get everything you need. And frankly, I don't trust the Senate Republicans to deliver that, but I also don't trust the calendar. The most important factor on Capitol Hill, not policy, not politics, is the calendar. And it's almost impossible to get anything done after the 4th of July. So the legislative season starts with the State of the Union, but in this case, because he's the new president, it'll just be an address to Congress. So Tuesday is the kickoff. And then you go all the way through to Memorial Day, and then maybe between Memorial Day and 4th of July, you can get something done. After the 4th of July, nothing gets done until the State of the Union again. And so do not be fooled. And I have to say, Mike Johnson did a great job. He's got, 3 or 4 seat majority. And I remember in the first term, all of the machinations and all the craziness that Paul Ryan, when he screwed the pooch on the Obamacare reform, and he didn't get our tax bill passed until December. Paul Ryan had 247 Republicans. It was the largest Republican House majority in more than 80 years. And Ryan threw it into the fire. When they lost control of the House in 2018, they threw away the largest Republican House majority in more than 80 years. And yet, Mike Johnson's able to pull this off, obviously, because he is completely in sync with the president. And what's going to happen is when a House bill and a Senate bill are different, they then go to conference. The Senate does have some advantages in conference because the Senate chair, the senator must chair the conference committee. However, what you're really going to be faced with is a binary choice. You either go with the House bill or not. I really think that we're going to see this House bill pass almost unchanged. It could be that the Senate just accepts the House bill and just moves on. And I would love to see that because it's a big test for Thune to see whether he can be trusted. He really impressed me the way he got these nominees through. Obviously, we're all disappointed that Matt Gaetz is not the Attorney General, but we're fine with Pam Bondi so far. But John Thune got Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and Robert Kennedy Jr. So these are all people we were told there was no way they could be confirmed, and Thune got it done. So that's sort of my take on it, sir.
Yeah, it's now the House bill that was passed. It will actually go to the Senate, right?
Yes,
do they have to vote on it? So it's a budget resolution over there, or can they just shove their version of it back at the House and say, let's go to conference?
Well, what they do is because they're different language, right? So the Senate has a choice. They can just take the House bill and pass it, and that's it. Game over. Or the Senate already passed a bill. So now if the Senate says, hey, our bill is different from your bill, and we're not going to deal with your bill, then they have to go to the conference where House and Senate negotiators they meld the two together, and they come up with one bill, and then that becomes the bill that goes to the floor, and if it passes, it goes to the president. So in the Reagan years, a lot of the work was done in reconciliation because the Republicans controlled the Senate, not the House, and so they were able to sort of pass whatever they needed to pass to get to reconciliation. But really, in recent years, there's been no reconciliation. There's been none of the sort of the conference bills, rather. In the Reagan years, it was in conference. But we haven't had these sort of conference committees because it's continuing resolution after continuing resolution.
Yeah, and I think that's why the one Republican that voted against this bill is concerned. Let's run that clip of Tom Massey real quick, about a minute of it.
Yeah. Can you just talk to us? Are you still a no? Is there anything?
They convinced me in there. I'm a no.
Is there anything?
Look, let me their own numbers. If the Republican plan passes under the rosiest assumptions, which aren't even true, we're going to add $328 billion to the deficit this year. We're going to add $295 billion to the deficit the year after that, and $242 billion to the deficit after that, under the rosiest assumptions. Why would I vote for that?
So are you solidly a no?
Yeah, they convinced me. I was a lean no until this meeting. Now I'm a no.
This no confirmed.
This is a no.
Why? Why?
They're talking points. Look. These are not something I made up. This is the leadership's talking points. It adds $328 billion to the deficit. It adds $295 billion to the deficit the year after that. The only way they get to this magic thing where it's not going to kill our country is 5 years from now, they imagine that 2.5% growth accumulates, and that even right here they say they're going to cap discretionary spending. You think we're going to cap discretionary spending and then spend at the rate of inflation after that? That has never happened. So their assumptions are wrong. But even if you take their assumptions at face value, they told us in there they're going to increase the deficit in 2025 by $328 billion. And I've been here long enough.
Yeah, I know Tom. He's been on my show several times. I consider him a friend. He's just one of the smartest people, if not the smartest guy in the House of Representatives, in my opinion. And all of those things he just said are no surprise to me. And actually, not surprised that he voted no. But maybe it's a little early for him to vote no now. I don't know, Neil. He's the one guy expected to vote no on this bill because he's adamantly opposed to continuing this deficit spending and building this debt. And so is everybody else, or supposed to be. How do we square that?
Listen, these projections are all garbage. What is this? This is 2025. Let's you and I go over the 2015 10-year projections from 2015 and just see how insane it was, or even go to the projections from the 90s when no one knew that there was going to be a war in Iraq. And so the projections are garbage. And the fact of the matter is so much of the action is handled outside of the budget because of what DOGE is doing with waste, fraud, and abuse, the layoffs, and then you have the president raising revenues from tariffs, and there's going to be economic activity. And so I just want to get this budget done. I want to save the tax cuts from the 2017 bill. I want to keep the promise on Social Security and overtime and tips being tax-free. And then I want to move on to other things. I really just want to get this budget out of the way because I've lived long enough to see that all these budgets are they're just garbage anyway, and it doesn't even matter.
And the Doge operation is serious, and it's not a short-term operation the way a lot of people are describing it. Well, Neil, thank you so much for joining us today. Folks, we'll see you on More War Monday. We'll be talking China with regular contributor, retired Navy Commander Randy Arrington, and you can find Neil McCabe at Reporter McCabe on X. Go follow him. Check out the show every night, the Hard News Show at 7:30 Eastern, and every weekend day with the Washington Desk with Neil McCabe at 7 p.m. Eastern on Saturday and Sunday. We will see you Monday. Thank you very much.
You're watching WorldViewTube, built on the 35 years of WorldView books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of